role models. It had very little to do with what I learned in the classroom, because I feel that what I was taught and what was modeled were in contradiction, often in a parochial setting. And if you ask me what kept me on the straight and narrow, well, first of all, I'm probably not on the straight and narrow. And most of it was fear. And fear doesn't last long, because when you face it and you overcome it, you're not afraid anymore. And it was always about getting in trouble. But I still feel like that upbringing of the parochial and the religious, of trying to do the right thing, I don't know if it's my ethical and moral compass, but I know I have a strong one. I attribute it to the family.
That was Rachell Koegel discussing the song You Are Here, which Liz Hanlon and I wrote after being inspired by Psalm 9. I'm Shep Rosenman. This is The Rest is Commentary, where we discuss what songs inspired by the Psalms, or Tehillim, inspire in my guests. Rachell is a writer and educator and lives in Oceanside, Long Island in New York with her husband Lenny and 2 rescue dogs, Stanley and Lester. She has 2 adult sons, Brad and Jeremy. Rachell has taught English at Long Beach High School for the past 27 years, focusing on the creative and talented writing program since 2004. She is a freelance writer, loves music, animals, and exercise. And she is my cousin, among the closest in a fairly large and somewhat tribal family. I want to mention that this episode is being posted in the memory of Selma Nadboy nee Rosenman, Rachel's mom. Her full name in Hebrew is Chaya Sima Esther Bat Avraham Zelig Zadel V'Rivka. I have so many fond memories of Selma and loved her very, very much. May her memory continue to be a blessing. Rachell and I will be talking about breaking glass and repairing what's broken, the simple profundity of how we treat each other, how every action, no matter how small, ripples outward to shape life, exploring God, unlearning negative patterns from childhood, being truly present, whether actions taken out of fear create sustainable results, and so much more. Let's start off by listening to You Are Here. Street Mall, the well-lit sign implores us. This way to the hiking shoes, the basketballs, downstairs to the new food court. Straight ahead to the fabulous. The arrow and the red dot say, you are here. Are here. The arrow and the red dot say, you are here. You are here. At the entrance to the canyon park, the picture map directs us. Go right to the boardwalk for the easy trek. Go left for the rocky climb. Straight ahead to the wondrous. The arrow and the green dot say, you are here. You are here. The arrow and the green dot say, you are here, you are here. Sour, sweet, salty, sweet, bitter, sweet, sad, sweet, bitter, sweet, sad and sweet, sad and sweet. Can you savor all the flavors? carless summer house. The GPS reminds us 60 miles on the turnpike now. It turns south and the old mill road, it's straight ahead. 2 times up. The arrow and the black dot say, you are here, you are here. The arrow and the black dot say, you are here, you are here. Let me kind of start with my usual spiel, which is, in the same way that I was inspired to write this song by whatever the psalmists had to say, I offered you this song in hopes that it inspired something in you, whether love or loathing, questions or commentary, hope or hate. I don't really care. It's just a platform for having a conversation.
So for me, this was very timely because I have a tendency to overthink and not be in the moment. So for me, training myself to be mindful of where I am in the moment and just be there and find grounding in that time without catastrophizing or hypothesizing or overthinking things. So for me, that's what it hit. It hit upon that, where am I in the moment? Like, what is real right now? Who am I right now? What am I anticipating? And is that, in fact, being mindful of this moment? So just to get on, I think a lot of it is symbolic of what certain places mean to us, what colors mean to us, what signals mean to us. And it's very easy to forget where we are and who's with us in that moment. And like, we have no tomorrow, we have no yesterday, we have now.
Right.
So I think that song spoke to me a lot about grounding and mindfulness and awareness and just being in the now. I love to listen to Sadhguru. So he's very much about letting go, but being here now. Someone was interviewing him and they asked him, who is the most important person in your life right now? And he said to the interviewer, you are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they were kind of thrown by that because he said, that's not what anyone expects to hear. But if I am with you now, I am with you completely.
Yeah.
So that the song kind of resonated. So many things. This is not in character for me because I never think about biblical stuff. Or I should say I do, but I don't admit to it. And I was thinking about Bereshit, and I was thinking about Adam and Eve, and when they didn't listen to the not to touch the fruit and not to eat it. And then God says to him, where are you? Even though we know God knows, it resonated that with me as well.
That moment was God trying to get Adam to be mindful. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, absolutely. I think, when we learn it when we're young, we learn it very punitively. And then we're taught, why would God ask that? God is all knowing. He's omniscient. Why would he need to know where they are? And why are they hiding from a being that obviously knows where they are? So it was more about, where are you? In other words, what's your accountability? Where are you right now? And why are you hiding from what you did? And to me, that spoke to accountability, responsibility, stepping up, but also living in the now.
Right.
It's all connected, but I think a lot of us don't live in the now because we're consumed by maybe guilt or things from the past, and we're afraid to move forward. And just being in the moment is so important to our journey.
Right.
To being healthy.
For sure.
I don't have many. One of my good qualities is to be completely present when I'm one-on-one with someone. I can't be in two relationships in the same moment.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I can be in them in the same, I guess, time span, but not in the moment. In the moment, I can give my attention to that one person.
In other conversations, we've talked about ADD.
Oh my God, yes.
So
Poster child.
You and me both. Do you feel like the hyper focus you get from your ADD helps you be in the moment with whoever it is or whatever it is you're doing?
Yes. I think I always looked at it as I wasn't quite able to do what my classmates were doing. And I used to examine and study their behaviors to see if I could copy them and get rid of my distractions. But then I realized that my distractions and my hyper focusing as a result of it, of being everywhere, actually makes me good at what I do. So it serves me in the classroom because I'm completely present. It serves me in my writing. I'm complete in my reading. And I do think it helps. I see it even in my kids. Unfortunately, one of them inherited it. He can hyper focus as well on stuff.
Right.
Well, actually, they both can. They both think they have it, but it looks more like my younger one than my older. But yeah, I do think it's a gift in disguise.
Yeah. So then it's not unfortunate.
No, Brad is the older one. Jeremy's the younger one. And Jeremy always struggled. Like, he would come home from school and I would say, how was school today? You know, he couldn't sit still. And he would say, my teacher has like 6 hairs on her chin. Like, that's what he took away from class. And I was like, here we go. It's mini me coming up the pipe, you know? He wasn't as misbehaved, though. He wasn't misbehaved at all. He just struggled.
Got it.
You know, it was rough. But we had more we had more knowledge when we were raising him than our parents did.
Sure.
We were just considered unruly and uncooperative.
Right. There was no ADD or ADHD diagnosis when we were kids.
No, it was sit down and shut the hell up.
Yeah.
That's what it was called. And go to the principal or leave the room or, if you couldn't do it. I mean, I never had the right books. I never had anything. Everything was everything all over. And then I didn't really care that much because it was so frustrating.
Sure.
But had I had someone all those years to teach me organization.
Right. I don't remember this about you growing up. Like, you always seemed so on everything, so on top of everyone and friendly with everyone, even though you were also...
Excuse me, do you want to rephrase that? Do you want to rephrase that? So on top of everyone?
Okay, that's a whole other conversation.
Okay, yeah. I have a good fake it, but I'm not even a fake person.
That's one thing. You've always been very real. You speak your mind, even if it makes people uncomfortable. You're usually very funny about it, and that's what makes people comfortable in their discomfort.
I would have to agree because I haven't learned to shut my mouth yet. And that's been a lifelong promise that I make to myself. I remember growing up, like Yom Kippur, one of the vows I used to make every year is, okay, you're not going to say as much as you do. You're going to be mindful of your speech. That lasts maybe till Yom Kippur fast was over.
Okay, but it's a good kavanah. It's a good intention.
So, yeah, and then I'm wondering how healthy that intention was to stifle something that is inherent in me instead of working with it to understand.
And so have you come on the other side of that? Because it sounds like your language as a youthful person, or at least the way you're thinking about it now, you were already seeing mindfulness as a tool.
Yes. I try very hard to be self-aware and reflective and very mindful of everything. I wish more people would, because you can't teach that to people.
Why do you wish more people would?
Because I think a lot of conflicts would be avoided if people would just be a little more reflective instead of reactive. And one thing that I bring to the table, and I was talking to my son about Jeremy this morning. He came home. He comes to Oceanside on Mondays for his business. He stops here. I'm usually at work, so I don't see him, but I finished work. So we went for breakfast and we were talking about it. And he was telling me like how I'm pretty easy, to be around as a parent, and his girlfriend. We were saying she loves you and all this. And I said, well, I used to be highly defensive, when people spoke to me about things. And he said, yeah, I remember that. He goes, but you're not like that anymore. So that was a really big compliment to me, because I remember my brother always saying when I got a note home from school, he goes, I know what she's going to say. He said, she's going to say, it's not my fault. The teacher hates me. Now it's different. Now I look at what I contributed, and it's very empowering because you're not victimizing.
How did you make this change?
I think it's just maturity, and it took me a very long time to mature.
Mm-hmm.
Probably longer. I see it in a lot of my students who are very young, that they're already at this part of it. They're already mindful and aware.
How old are you students?
High school, 9th through 12th. I have 9th through 12th in each class I teach because I teach writing.
Mm.
So they have to be reflective because we go over their work.
Right.
And they have to look at it from a critical lens and not be defensive and separate it from who they are. And that's very hard at first because it seems almost personal. And then they learn that it's about the writing. It's not about them. It's about making them stronger. And that's a tool that they can use to navigate life.
For sure.
Yeah. And I wish I learned how to do it without feeling I was no good or that I had to be defensive or I had to argue my point.
Where did that come from?
Nervous breakdown. No, if I'm going to be totally honest, it came from leaving what was comfortable and uncomfortable in the way I was raised and heading in a different direction for what felt good for me. And doing that for myself without worrying about how it would impact my parents or my siblings or the community by being maybe very different, or because it used to be considered rebellious.
Right.
My way of looking at things, it was considered just wrong or rebellious. And then saying to myself, well, actually, this is your gut, your intuition. This is something that's native and organic for you. You have to listen to it. You don't have to be fighting with people. You just have to take care of you. And once I started being my own best friend, I think that's when it happened.
That's beautiful. And when did that happen? Were you 18, 20, 30?
36, it started. I'd say by my 40s, it was flourishing. And in my 50s, I feel the freest. I think a lot had to do with, my parents were still alive very much in my 30s and my mother died when I was 42 and very much didn't want to create any stress or anxiety for them. The way we were raised, it wasn't necessarily about us. It was about if I did something, my mother immediately thought she did something to cause it.
Yeah.
So you carry that.
For good and for bad, though.
Yes. But for me, it was like carrying the weight of not wanting her to feel responsible for my choices. And then when I set that free, and I was able to do that because my father had Alzheimer's. So those choices no longer really impacted him throughout my 40s.
Right.
And he died right before I turned 51. So
it's amazing that you remember the ages.
Oh, I remember. You remember your first loss. And also, in fact, my brother was 10 years older, my sister 6 years older. For me, it was, a different experience from them. But also, I think it impacted me because when she was pretty much at the end, and I used to want to see as much of her as I could, and I would drive there, and let's say it was Yontif or a shot. She died right after Shavuos. So I drove there. I drove there on Shavuos. And that's what bringing in the now. I wanted to be with her in the now, at that point. But when I drove there and I got to the house, my dad was so angry that I drove there.
On Yontif, on the Jewish holiday.
On Yontif. Yes. So he wouldn't really talk to me at first when I got there. And for me, but then this is terrible and it's going to sound comedic, but 10 minutes later, he forgot how I got there. So he was talking to me for the rest of the time. So I knew it just had to go over it. And I know for him, for me doing that was really hard for him.
Sure.
So I respect that. And then when I left, he was clueless, how I was getting, and it was done. But my dad was never angry with me. My whole life, he was never angry with me, ever. He never expressed a harsh word.
That's amazing.
Yeah. He was a very, very gentle soul.
I mean, I experienced your mom as having a cutting sense of humor, but I never saw harsh words come from her, but I wasn't her kid.
Yeah, I don't think she'd want that on a podcast. So my mother was highly reactive until she got the treatment she needed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, in our family, I always felt that everyone thought it was okay to lose your cool, to lose your temper, as long as after you just said, oh my God, I lost it. And that was, but no change in behavior was ever required.
Right.
And that was the change I wanted for my family. I didn't want my kids growing up with that.
Yeah, same here.
So I think that's all part of this. So that's all. And Lenny, too, he grew up in a very volatile atmosphere. So for both of us, we had to unlearn it and we had to be. So that's part of what you're saying. Like we had to unlearn the past and be in the now. All the time. Like what's a red light? What's a green light? What's a red sign? What's a green sign? And it's been a real labor for both of us to unlearn what we grew up with.
Is it still an issue?
No, it's just that he still carries a lot of, he didn't understand why. For Lenny, he didn't have the kind of mother like I had, who was your biggest cheerleader, who was your biggest supporter. And even if she lost her shit, she was the most loving, unconditional human that you can have. He didn't have that. He had the explosiveness. He had the love. She was very warm, but he didn't have the accountability. My mom had recognized whether she was able to change it. Yeah, she changed a lot of it. But, the next generation where we make the full change.
Sure.
She did as much as she could. Now our generation. Now for him, he came from no accountability to having to do all that work on his own.
Well, look, it's always a process. There are some families where they learn from their parents and they just recapitulate everything they learned. They repeat it exactly. And then there are people like us who are responses to our parents. The most obvious way perhaps is kind of religious practice. In my case, my religious journey continues to be a series of sine curves, like it goes up and down with my religious practice, and what I practice changes. The constant for me is always immersion in Jewish texts, which is so ironic because I was such a bad student. It was rabbi and then rabbi.
Yeah, but you weren't a bad student. You had other things going on.
But I didn't pay attention in class.
Well, who would? Look at them.
But they did not know how to manage that.
Big doofus.
Well, look.
No, they weren't even good people. I'm sorry. They weren't good people. I don't care if you put a rabbi label on something. That doesn't exempt you and absolve you from being a decent human. They were abusive.
On the contrary, I think they should be held to a higher standard, in my opinion.
Agreed. But what I'm saying is they don't do that work. To get there, they get the smicha. Almost anyone can get. It's like the EDD doctorate that everyone gets now. It's like a mail-in order, and it doesn't really mean you did the work. Like Brad had.
No kidding.
My older one, he was abusive. Yeah, I let them know what for, though. I did. I took him out.
Were they responsive? Did they try to do better?
No, I mean, we weren't going to leave him. No matter. It was pretty much toward the end of his high school anyway. But look, my kids went to yeshiva under protest from me anyway.
Because that's what Lenny wanted?
Yes, and my parents. You couldn't be in this family if your kids didn't do what everyone. That's how it is here. I mean, now it's not. But I didn't have the courage to say anything about it.
Well, my parents, it's interesting. I think in a strange way, they were both open about it for me. And my brother and I have this conversation all the time. We have the same biological parents, but we have entirely different psychological parents. They were different people with me than they were with my brother. And I think one of the reasons they were more open with me was because they were so fierce and tough on my brother. My brother talks about this a lot. My father was really tough on him. And I think my mother was too, while she may not have used physical violence. That's not the phrase my brother uses. There was a lot of emotional manipulation of my father to cause him to behave in ways that were putting a lot of pressure on my brother. And while it was unspoken for many, many years, it's all about the fact that he was gay.
Yeah.
And they knew that from a very young age, or were afraid that he would be.
But they ignored it.
I think that they ignored it publicly.
Well, they didn't know what to do with it.
I think privately they would sit during together trying to figure out what to do. Not that there's anything you can or should do other than encourage your kids to find their best selves, right? Whoever they are. And that's what's so inspiring about what you talk about with your journey. You know, you've been through this journey of trying to find your best self. I feel like I've been through that too, and I'm still on it. And this podcast is an expression of that, and may even be for me the pinnacle of that expression, because it has my three favorite loves: music, study of Torah, and learning from people and talking to them and connecting, right? So that's the trifecta. It's the home run, you know, take your sports metaphor. And it took me until I was, it was 2 years ago, 57, 58, to even conceive of a formula that would get me there, though I did not have this in mind when I started. When I started this, it was just, I want to write songs based on Tehillim. And it took several people, including and especially Alyssa Thomas Newborn and Sherry Hirsch. Sherry's still a rabbi out here. Alyssa is now a rabbi at Columbia Presbyterian in New York, pushing me to come up with concepts. Sherry really pushed me on the why. Alyssa pushed me on the what. And I think that I'm still figuring it out. And I think that these conversations are very, very helpful in that regard. Mm-hmm. But I want to come back to something you said earlier, because I think it's related to this. You've talked about being in the moment and being mindful, and you talked about the mindfulness on Yom Kippur to speak less, or being mindful of your speech is what you said.
Yeah, well, to control my speech a little more, filter it, and, you know, not get involved in things that won't benefit me in the long run, or that give me panic after I do them, that it wasn't a good idea. You know, I think it's impulsivity in a lot of ways.
So that's not only about speech, that's behavior as well.
Yes. Yeah, it's all interconnected for me, because I have a foot and mouth disease.
Yeah.
I mean, it's bad.
Well, look, that was a big part of our family generally. I mean, I'm sure your mom did that.
Yeah. Oh my God, I inherited all of that from her.
Your grandmother Rivka and my grandmother Leah were famous for that behavior. And so is my wife.
See, I didn't know that. See, I would never think that of Sharon.
Oh, yeah.
She seems very much like very thoughtful about each word she says. I guess I haven't had that many interactions with her, so I don't know. But
in initial encounters, she's more discreet, controlled. You and she have seen each other so rarely that each one is like a new initial encounter. She's also worked very hard at this issue because she wants to have less of a foot in mouth disease. She just wants to speak her mind and do it in a way that hopefully people don't find offensive. And it's the hopefully that allows her to just go ahead and do it. And she's learned how to be charming about it over the years.
That's good.
And when she's not charming, you know, gay and dread is what my father would say. Actually, what he would say is, fuck them if they can't take a joke.
Right. And also, we're coming from a generation where we're learning that other people's reactions to what we say is not necessarily our problem. You know, I'm not saying you could say whatever you want, but people respond with their own personal issues to everything. And what we might think is a very, would say, parve remark might be a trigger for someone. So you can't always be polishing your speech. And I think one of my good character traits is that, yes, I shoot straight from the hip. No one has to second guess it. If I'm your friend completely. I don't half-ass relationships. If it's a half relationship, it's not for me.
Right.
You know? And I think that's part of it. And mostly we grew up knowing that, you know, Lashon Hara was a terrible thing. You remember Kenny Hershorn, my boyfriend, when we were growing up, he became a rabbi. He used to buy me sefarim, like as gifts. And I would be happy with a pocketbook, with, you know, flowers, with some candy. But he would bring me one of the books he bought me, I remember to this day, was called Guard Your Tongue. And that clearly was him saying nicely, like,
Yeah.
So he had me read it. I read it. I understood it. It made me more anxious and depressed because they tell you in the book not even to speak good things because it could invite bad.
Sure.
And I'm like, so should I? It didn't resonate with me at all. And then when I married Lenny, I still had the book and he loved it. So, he's reading it. He's like, you're throwing this out. I'll take it. So you could see this has been a pattern of mine for my life.
Here's the thing I wanted to ask. I'm going to reflect my experience and tell me whether there's any truth in that for you or whether you were forged in opposition to it. In my case, the Musser movement from Kenny Hirschhorn and wherever else I got it in high school and even in college, I felt like it gave me concepts to bring into my life. Speak positively, do positive things, support the people around you. Don't put yourself in situations that you know are going to create problems for you. Those are all 40 some odd year later versions of the lessons I learned in those books. And now there's a whole movement around it. You can go online and be part of the Musser movement, and you don't have to be religious at all. It's just about kind of being a good person in the world and, trying to improve the way you behave towards others and, of course, towards God, if that's part of your world.
Tikkun olam.
So, yeah, tikkun olam. Exactly. Well, look, for me, I believe that that's the, in quotes, Jewish mission. And the reason why I put Jewish in quotes is because I don't think it's just for Jews.
No.
I think Jews got the ball rolling, at least the way our Torah presents it. And our liturgy says to us, go out there, behave in a way that people can learn from. That's what it means to be an Or LaGoyim. Not that Jews are in any way inherently better than anyone else. And frankly speaking, many Jews are worse. But we are supposed to go out there and fix the world through modeling good behavior. And of course, there's a myriad of debates we can have about what is good behavior. Is it the 613 mitzvos? Is it some of them? Is it that which you find through exploring them? Or is it just what you learn by observing other good behavior and take God and the Torah out of the mix? Anyway, I think the question that comes at the end of this for me is, to what extent, notwithstanding the fact that you've pulled away and, as you put it, rebelled, to what extent are the lessons of your youth from elementary school and high school and that your family gave you about religious practice, to what extent is that still part of your life without thinking about it, because it's just something that's natural to you because you think that is who you are and is good? And to what extent have you kind of rejected particular things?
Well, so it's interesting you make all these comments being an Orla Gayim, and I like to say Orla Olam.
That's beautiful.
But I think for me, it's funny. I officiated a wedding yesterday. Don't even ask how this came about.
I love that.
And one of the parts when I was explaining the Jewish traditions under the chuppah, one of the things we were saying when I was explaining the breaking of the glass was about remembering the others who are not fortunate, and as Jews, our responsibility to repair what we see as not whole and to try to make beautiful what is broken. But it bothered me to say, as Jews, okay, the crowd was very mixed. It was a Japanese Jewish girl marrying a Chinese Jewish boy. It was very interesting. It was a student I had many years ago, a lawyer in Tacoma, Washington. She lives in Tacoma Park now and had asked me to do this for her. I didn't want to. That's a whole other story, but I can't say no. I love this girl. She's wonderful. Anyway, when I was explaining that, you have to be reflective when you're writing these parts of the ceremony and see, can I say something if it's bullshit for me?
Right.
And I realized for me, it's not, because the reason I teach is to make the world better. It sounds corny and cheesy, but there's nothing I do during the day in my life with my students that isn't about getting them to be healthy, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. Physically, I try, but that's really not, you can just model behaviors. And it's all about modeling the behavior. And what was missing for me is how I behave, and what I have intrinsically grown up with, I would say, is more the fact that I grew up with very loving parents, siblings also that I know would do anything for me. So it was role models. It had very little to do with what I learned in the classroom, because I feel that what I was taught and what was modeled were in contradiction. Often in the parochial setting. And if you ask me what kept me on the straight and narrow, well, first of all, I'm probably not on the straight and narrow. And most of it was fear. And fear doesn't last long because when you face it and you overcome it, you're not afraid anymore. And it was always about getting in trouble. But I still feel like that upbringing of the parochial and the religious of trying to do the right thing. I don't know if it's my ethical and moral compass, but I know I have a strong one. I attribute it to the family. I see it in my brother, I see it in my sister. Where anyone is lacking in one area, they really care about the welfare and being of others. And I don't know if it has a lot to do with what I'm reading. I mean, Torah, the stories are nice, but it was more punitive the way we were taught things. Maybe you had a different experience.
I'm 1,000% with you on that. The way we were taught, it's all about, the God of vengeance, and the only way, even though we were taught to say, V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha, love God, your God. And so love is a component. It was all about the yiras shamayim, the fear of heaven.
Yes. And I feel like that's how parenting was back in the day, too. You had to fear, the wrath instead of your parents bringing you to understanding what works in a family.
Right.
And I think that's where we're coming out, is to try to make that change, affect that change so that religion is more beautiful overall, because it's not about getting in trouble or being punished or committing sin.
And this is why I love studying Jewish texts, because, we were taught what we were taught, and you acquired whatever knowledge you acquired from that teaching. But when you actually immerse yourself in the texts, it's so much more nuanced. My favorite example is actually connected to the breaking of the glass. First of all, you mentioned that either your student or their spouse was Japanese.
Well, my student was Japanese and Jewish. Her mother's Japanese, her father's Jewish.
That's amazing, because the breaking of glass, there's a Japanese tradition, I think it's called kintsugi or something like that, where you take cherished broken, vases and glasses, and you glue them back together, and where all the cracks were, you put gold.
Wow.
And they take this brokenness and make something very, very beautiful with it.
That's what they're doing with they're making a mezuzah.
Oh, amazing. So that's a mezuzah kintsugi or whatever it's called.
But I wish we should have done this a week ago. I could have said that. I could have sounded like I know something.
For their 10th anniversary. So the breaking of the glass has its roots in the Gemara. I mean, the story is told in the Gemara, and I really forget who it is. I should look this up.
Well, if you're looking for me to give you the name, I don't have it. Shopping.
All of the rabbis are celebrating at a wedding, and it went a little too far, according to this Talmudic story. It went so far that the most powerful rabbi inadvertently killed another rabbi.
Oh my God. I thought you were going to say he broke a glass.
That's the first part of the story. The next part of the story is the rabbis are getting out of hand. They know how to party. And so another rabbi then breaks a glass because he didn't want the rabbis to be too happy, and the breaking of the glass is somehow, it's a valuable item, it got them to sober up, if you will. And in discussing this particular thing, it connects back to one of the other Psalms that tells you, Gilu bir ada, rejoice in trembling. So when you get past the God of vengeance that we were brought up with, what the Torah is really trying to say is ahava and yira, do both and find the right balance to engage the world in. You have to tremble in the right moment. You have to find joy in the right moment. But the ultimate message of the language of this Tehillim is, even in trembling, find joy. Gilu.
Well, so there was a girl in my class who found a lot of joy in trembling.
What do you mean?
Just saying. I can't talk about this on the podcast. And I'm going to tell you, it was in highlight in 8th grade in front of all of us.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it took me till I was like 30 to figure out what the hell she was doing.
Wow.
Sorry.
I was so naive. I had no idea any of that was going on.
Me too. I'm telling you, I was telling Dasi the story because we were doing something in exercise class one day, and it reminded me of this girl who we grew up with, who did this thing during our class all the time till she was sweating and trembling. And for years, I just didn't know what it was. And then one day, a few years ago, and I'm watching everyone in the class in a specific thing, and it hit me, oh my God, that's what that was. And she must have had some very terrible things going on at home to create that. It created an awareness, which put a lot of pieces together for me. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to go off like that, but when you're talking about, a nice mix, and you use tremble, I'm sorry, I couldn't.
Girl then, woman now, if she had things going on that were causing that, but,
yeah,
maybe that was also just her way, like.
Yeah, it could be her way. Maybe that's how she got through Chumash.
Exactly.
I mean, I couldn't. But, when you talk about the text and reading back, my one problem that I have with it is the whole concept of God, because you don't have to necessarily believe there is one to also love the traditions.
For sure.
Right?
For sure. And by the way, you don't need to believe in the old man in the sky with the long white beard, right?
I don't.
I talked about this with Rabbi Kasher. Our tradition does not define God. Our tradition says there is a God, believe in God, don't believe in not gods, right? But it doesn't say this is what God is, this is what God does. For me, you used the word empowering before. What's empowering about our tradition is that it says, find God. Go out and figure out what God is. And that's where it comes back to our national mission. L'takein olam. It's not just l'takein olam, to repair the world. It's at the end of Aleinu in the Alkei Nekava, the second paragraph. It's l'takein olam.
B'malchut Shaddai. Doesn't it keep going?
Yes, it does. So, but let's phrase by phrase. B'malchut Shaddai, it's repair the world with the sovereignty of God. V'chol b'nei basar yikru es shmecha. And all of humanity, maybe the animals too,
will call your name.
Right. And so our tradition has this thing about name, like, a name, tov shem kishem and tov. A name is a thing of value, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the name also identifies our essences. So if we are all calling God's essence, it means we are all connected to this thing. The language I like to use is this thing that's greater than ourselves. I personally am open to the idea that the thing that's greater than ourselves is the connection between Rachel and I. There's not this other entity out there except when Rachel and I are connecting. Or Shari and I, or, Maya or Eitan and I, or whoever else I might be in conversation with on this podcast. I'm similarly open to the fact that there's something else out there. I don't know what it is, but it just wants to connect with us. And our connections in this conversation is a reflection of that.
Yeah, and the energy field. I'm a strong believer in energy. Good energy from people. I feel it right away, or I feel it right away when it's not good energy.
Yeah.
That's part of it too, because they have to exist at the same time.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, whether or not, this is something Lenny and I talk about a lot, because, I'm not at all religious, spiritual, I guess you would say, but it doesn't have to be specific. I'm spiritual to humanity. I love humanity, but at the same time, I don't. At the same time, I don't.
You want to love humanity. It's aspirational.
I do. It makes it very hard sometimes. I try to be, well, when I ask Lenny, because he still does a lot of the day-to-day, he davens every morning. He keeps Shabbos for the most part, a lot of it, not all of it. There are things he won't do. And I don't understand it necessarily. So we talk about it, and he's very patient with me because I can be rather harsh. And I'm always like, well, don't you just think that's so stupid? What are you doing? And he's like, I understand you think it's stupid, but for me, it's something that keeps me connected. And I don't want to lose that. So I get it. I think the hedonist in me doesn't want to do any more suffering or have any more controls.
Well, hold on. Are you really a hedonist? Like, you don't strike me as, you're not going to clubs and right.
No. I stay in my house. I don't do anything. But what I'm saying is, I don't I remember, Darcy and I used to have these conversations all the time. It would be June and we would already be dreading Yom Kippur. And the whole summer, all we did was, no, she'd be like, I don't want to go to Yom Kippur for Rockaway. She's like, Marion's going to make me go. I have to sit there all day. I was like, just don't. I can't do that to my mother. I have to go, she would say. And I was just dreading Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur sitting in shul. And it dawned on me that, wait a second, I don't have to do this.
Right.
I really don't. And that was very freeing. And then I didn't mind it as much.
Right. That helps a lot.
When you take the control away and you realize you have choice, like I see with Lenny, all the things he does is because he chooses to.
Yeah.
I never did it because I chose to. So it's just interesting to me how I'm not a hedonist, but I also don't like being restricted because I feel like I spent most of my life with rules of restriction that didn't make sense to me.
Yeah.
If that makes sense to you.
Not only does it make sense to me, it's similar to my experience.
Okay. So I feel like I missed out on so much that was going on Saturdays, whenever, when I could have been part of something that interested me, but it was a no-go.
Right. To circle back, that's why this song spoke to you, because it's about being present in the now. To connect it back to the Tehillim, because I think the connection to this particular Tehillim is not obvious.
No, it didn't seem that it was at all. And I was looking at the translations that different ones had about it. Tell the wonders of God, rejoice and exult in you. It talks about God's destructive. I think that's what triggered in me my upbringing when I read all of that, because that's what it was.
Right.
God is this, God is this, God is this. But then it's also celebrating God.
Right.
It's rejoicing and finding the love through that. For me, that's how it is in energy with people.
Mm-hmm. So for me, I think you're right. I think these texts can very easily push you away. And it's no different than going to any convocation, any gathering where you don't know the rules, the hints, the subtexts. The first time you walk into synagogue, or the first time I walked into a church, my law school friend Amy brought me to Christian Scientists. She brought me to a Christian Scientist service. And I was fascinated, but feeling completely at sea. And it reminded me of whenever I go into a Hasidic shul, because it's a whole other world in certain Hasidic communities. They don't know me. They're like wondering what this stranger is doing there. I'm dressed differently than they are. I think you say this prayer here, but they're doing another prayer instead at these Hasidic communities. So you're feeling like a fish out of water. But Amy, smart as she was, said, okay, I'm going to be your guide. And she started translating for me. And then I started to understand. And I think when we encounter these texts, there's something similar going on. Yes, on its face, it's very off-putting to talk about God's name being almost high.
It's formidable. Yeah. And also because it's like anything with literature, when you read a text, you have to look between that author's intent and the bigger message, the bigger picture. But it does talk about karma in this Tehillim.
For sure.
It says the wicked's own deeds. That's something that's relatable to me. Also, their own foot is caught in the net they have hidden. That's my foot and mouth disease. That spoke to me. And also to know that you're not being ignored if you're suffering, because we don't understand suffering. We don't understand. Like, I'll never come to terms with my mother suffering, my grandmother, the Holocaust.
Sure.
I mean, it does speak. I think for me, once I see the name of God written so many times, I don't even engage.
Yeah, I understand. And for me, I've learned to dive in. It used to be despite that, and now it's because of that. But to get to what to me is the essence of the psalm, it comes in verse 14, which in the Sfaria translation that I picked many, many moons ago was, have mercy on me, O Lord. Actually comes in 15. Have mercy on me, O Lord. See my affliction at the hands of my foes. You who lift me from the gates of death, so that in the gates of fair Zion I might tell all your praise. praise. I might exult in your deliverance. And for me, the key there is there's this concept, even in the moment of death, even in the moment of crisis when the world is against me, I am still thinking about, it's not an accident that the directors of the Matrix series called the place where people were living while the machines were controlling them Zion, right? It's a place of life. It's an aspirational place. Even though in that movie they wanted to control the machines and get back to, the top of the world, live on the earth, on the land itself. I think this too is talking about something beautiful that we have to look forward to. In the context of this psalm, it's Zion, it's the Beis Hamikdash, but in particular, it's the temple, which will be rebuilt eventually. So it's a messianic thing that's saying this is my read of messianism, when we humans are able to behave in a way that achieves that tikkun olam, so we've learned already and we are now calling in God's name, this thing that's recognizing that it's not about us individually, it's about that which is greater than ourselves, which may simply just be the person next to you or may not. When we are treating each other that way, that's when the messianic age will come. For me, it doesn't mean my ancestors of 1,000 years ago will suddenly come to life and their bones will be walking and welcoming me, and that I'm going to magically get transported on a Persian rug to Jerusalem from Los Angeles. It means the messianic age is we humans will get to know each other through peace, and we will lead with curiosity. And so the song talks about building that space exactly as you articulated, by being where you are here and now in the moment, because, time is up before you know it.
Yes, it is.
I still think of you as a 16-year-old and, I'm about to hit 60.
Hello. Yeah. I think what you're saying also in that respect is where we began this, with being reflective and self-aware, because you cannot make connections and create a better world if people aren't willing to look at what they contribute and how they can make it better. And when you say about the messianic realm, I don't necessarily believe, look, we grew up, Mashiach is coming. Yeah, no. So he's coming when everyone keeps Shabbos.
And who says he's a he? Maybe he's a she or a they.
Exactly. Or maybe there is none. Maybe it was created in a time of extreme despondency where they needed something to think that this wasn't the end, and dealing with feeling really terrible. But regardless, if everyone puts their best foot forward and their mind is open to accepting everyone where they are in the here, right? Not where they want them to be, but accept them as they are, you already have a messianic age. You don't need redemption.
That's beautiful.
And that's kind of where I'm saying, I want my focus is with what I do with my students, what I try to do with my kids, my own kids. I should probably do it more in my marriage. But, it's that accountability, responsibility. If everyone took it and not said, I have this conversation all the time, I'm sure you do too, or Shari does. I think she's vegan.
Pretty much.
Is about, everyone says to me, what is your one thing you not eating this going to do? It doesn't mean any. I said, but everything mattered. One person invented, one person is a generation. It's something, but that's an argument we have all the time. So I do what I can in my little world to make it better, but I know I'm ultimately powerless in the bigger picture, but it's the here and now I'm concerned with.
I'm also going to argue that you're not powerless in the bigger world. You're powerless if you only look at today or your lifetime as the window of experience, because Rachel and Shep can't control the world and make it behave the way we want it to. But what we can do is, and honestly, this is why I'm doing this podcast. This is a legacy project for my kids to have these kinds of conversations so that, we have the conversations in other contexts, but having me have the conversation with someone else allows them to hear these conversations in a non-threatening way. I'm not trying to influence their behavior directly. I am trying to give them the knowledge, because for me, it really comes down to empowerment. we wanted our kids to go to a yeshiva day school so that they would be empowered to make the choices about life from having the knowledge. Now, unfortunately, the day school system here wasn't as good as we had hoped, and that's why we started homeschooling. Even there, we did Jewish education, and it was all about empowering them. And who knows where their journeys will end up. But what I do know is that the conversations that we're having today will be available to them when they want to talk about whatever subjects we've talked about today and that I talk about with Chaim Bialik or Lita Kalogridis or I did want to just connect one last dot, because the red dot says, sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yes, the red, the green, the black. I think there was a black one.
That's where it goes. It's red to green to black. And, that too is a metaphor.
Did you mean the black dot to be at the end of your journey?
Bingo. Yes.
Okay. That's what I figured. It's kind of fade to black. Exactly.
I really give credit for these lyrics to Liz Hanlon. It's my thing to try to find songs to connect to Tehillim. And I was aware of this Tehillim, and I presented the Tehillim to the chapter of the Psalms to Liz, and she's like, how are these connected? And I explained that it's in particular at the end of each verse, straight ahead to the fabulous, straight ahead to the wondrous, straight ahead to time is up.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that was the one that was consistent. And also most of the chorus is in sync. And then there's one line that's more synesthesia than it is actual taste.
What do you mean?
In other words, you do salty sweet, bittersweet, but then when you get to sad sweet,
exactly,
that's synesthesia, and it changes there.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's how we got to Sad Sweet Song. That was the connection. But ultimately, this song is about, like I said before, here and now is what will get us to Zion. I'm going to just say thank you. You are an amazing conversation partner. I love talking to you, always have.
You make it very easy, and I hope you don't have to edit too much because of the things I said, especially about the trembling girl. I'm sorry.
I'm keeping that in now, right?
I'm so sorry about that. I think it traumatized me, quite frankly, because the fact that I remember it is pretty disturbing.
This is great.
It was really a lot of fun. Yeah, it was great.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, it was great.
All right, sending you so much love. Thanks so much for listening. Special thanks to Rachell Koegel for joining me, to Emil Stern and E. Rose for their help in producing this episode, and to Jessica Chana Sweedler for her help on social media. You can find You Are Here and all of the other songs in this song cycle on most platforms that stream or download music, including Spotify and Apple. In the next scheduled episode of The Rest is Commentary, I will be talking to Rabbi Joe Black, who is retiring from his position as senior rabbi at Temple Emmanuel in Denver, Colorado. Joe is not only an amazing rabbi, author, and educator, but he's a fabulous singer, guitar player, and songwriter too. You can find out more about him by checking out his website, Rabbi Joe Black. That's Joe, J-O-E, Black, and Rabbi are spelled as you'd expect, including finding his albums Wire and Wood and Praying with Our Feet. In our episode today, we will discuss songs and relationships as divine gifts, the role of spirituality in creativity, the importance of collaboration, managing dual identities, like being a rabbi and a musician, managing dual identities of being a friend and a rabbi, exploring the stages of spirituality, the profound insights and personal growth that come from simply having conversations, lack of awareness as an element of idolatry, and so much more. All inspired by Rabbi Black's thoughts after listening to Endless, which was inspired by Psalm 42 and written by Liz Hanlon and me. Please join us. I am also working on a special and possibly timely episode of The Rest is Commentary dedicated to the memories of Sarah Lynn Milgram and Yaron Lishinsky, who worked at the Israeli Embassy in Washington, D.C., and were murdered as a purported act of protest against the war Israel faces in Gaza. May their memories be a blessing. My guest for that episode is master educator, rocker, ritual leader, co-founder of Lab Shul, Naomi Less. I'll let everyone know if we can get that together amidst the busy schedules of everyone involved in putting these episodes together. Please join us for that too whenever we end up releasing it.